can't. The two blobs on either side of the hierarchy representing different projects are encapsulated ranges, but you can't change those. You can't do anything that would stop those being encapsulated ranges. Which means if you try and put in something which is going to leave it without a maximal element or a minimal element within that sub-hierarchy, you're not allowed to do it. So this is problematic. You need hierarchies that can contain encapsulated ranges, which is difficult enough. Any tree-like structure, for example, which is a fairly naturally occurring beast in organisations, there are no encapsulated ranges in a tree-like hierarchy because there's no unique minimal element. Okay, so you add a minimal element, but then you've only got one big encapsulated range, the whole hierarchy. So it's really dubious how much use ARBAC 97 is. It's interesting to note as a sort of in passing that if you have got an encapsulated range, then it appears as the administrative scope of some role. So if there are encapsulated ranges, we can pick them out. They will be the administrative scope of some role, which suggests that RHA4 is going to be more useful. Or, well, certainly it's going to be more widely applicable. You may argue that you may want to nail down your administration. You actually don't want to allow very much. But that perhaps depends on the application. So as I sort of skipped a slide, you also have to preserve encapsulated ranges. You can't break any whenever you perform a hierarchy operation in ARBAC 97. And as we've seen in earlier slides, this stops you from doing quite a lot of things. So not only are you limited to the hierarchies you can start with, you're limited in what you can do to the hierarchies that you can handle. In contrast, administrative scope is dynamic. It will just bend and adapt when you make changes to hierarchy. I mean, if you keep making changes, it's likely that you'll fracture the administrative scope and you'll end up with very small administrative scopes. But, well, you should take more care about how you change your hierarchy, perhaps. But the point is that you can do it. Whether you should is another question. So one of the objections to RBAC 96 is that you have this percolation of permissions up the hierarchy, which means that roles at the top of the hierarchy have all the permissions. And a number of researchers, particularly perhaps in Britain, have said that this is probably a bad thing. Now, we recognise the dangers of super users who are too powerful. Do you want your bank manager, for example, being able to sort of have the permissions of a bank clerk or a teller? Probably not. They don't need them. So the principle of least privilege is violated quite nicely by RBAC 96. So one of the things you might want to do is have a sort of more fragmented hierarchy where you take out some of the edges. So in this hierarchy, again, I hope you can see, I've sort of taken out some of the lines in the underlying role hierarchy and added a couple in the extended hierarchy. So I've actually added some tuples, some pairs in the admin-authority relation. And this enables us to administer this hierarchy quite happily. You couldn't use this, you couldn't administer this hierarchy in ARBAC 97. There's no encapsulated ranges here. I'd also claim that my approach is rather simple, or rather simpler at least. You may not think it's simple, but it's simpler than ARBAC 97. This is not the full set of conditions for the success or otherwise of an add role command in ARBAC 97. So you've got this relation can modify. Well, I'm not going to go through it. I'm just trying to give you an impression of the fact that it's actually rather complicated. There's two preconditions that have to be satisfied. You have to be able to find something in can modify which allows you to do it. But also, you have to have this rather odd condition about immediate ranges of the child and the parent. Now, I simply haven't got time to tell you what an immediate range is, but suffice to say, it's to do with encapsulated ranges, but there's special kinds of encapsulated ranges. Checking this condition is non-trivial. Right? So this is another precondition, but there's also a post-condition. which is that you have to check, if you do add this role, that you haven't broken any encapsulated ranges. So, this is quite a job. This is not an easy task to add a role in ARBAC 97. In contrast, you just check whether C and P belong to the administrative scope of A, which I think is a bit simpler. So how do you build a role-based system in the wild? How do you get a role hierarchy? In ARBAC 97, you've got this can-modify relation. And it's defined by encapsulated ranges in the role hierarchy. Well, that's fine as far as it goes. But if you want to build a hierarchy, where are you supposed to start from? You've got no can-modify relation. Remember, the can-modify relation is static, so you can't change that. So where do you start? How do you actually get a role hierarchy in the first place? You would like to think that some administrative model would actually provide a means for building role hierarchies as well. Well, in fact, in RHA 4, all you need is for the system to come with an administrative role A and for a single pair in the admin authority relation. And then A controls itself and everything underneath it, well, so it starts building things underneath. It starts building a role hierarchy. I haven't really got time to do anything else at all. Right, okay. I think I'll stop there. I could talk, but it would just be rushed, and I think that would be a shame. So let me just skip to the end. Just to say that I would say that administrative scope is a powerful primitive concept for role-based administration. Gives rise to this family of models, RHA 1 through to 4. The only ones I've really used are 1 and 4. The others were sort of intermediate steps, if you like. I'd say it's widely applicable. I also claim you can build administrative frameworks for more complex RBAC models. I was hoping to talk a little bit about role-based trust management that Professor Lee has been looking at. I was also hoping to talk about ERBAC 96, which is another model due to Ravi Sandhu. But there are rather natural ways of extending administrative scope, certainly to ERBAC 96. It's much more vague whether it works for role-based trust management. But as I say, it's flexible, it's widely applicable. What am I trying to do at the moment? Well, I'm still looking at administrative models for these more complex role-based models. Separation of duty constraints we haven't really had time to talk about, but also how you might administer those. A graduate student of mine is looking at implementing an RBAC API in Java with RHA4 functionality, which is quite interesting. I'm hoping to look at role-based trust management a bit more. And does administrative scope, because it naturally identifies blocks in a hierarchical structure, can we adapt it to different contexts, like file systems? You know, you've got directory structures that are tree-like. Can we in some way use this concept elsewhere in access control data structures that are hierarchical? And these are some references, most of which you didn't see because I didn't give you about the last 15 slides of my talk. Thank you very much for listening.
Are there any questions? We still have 2 or 3 minutes for questions. Yes?
So with your ARH4 model, you completely remove any super user privilege in there? Is that inherent in this structure?
Well, that's an interesting question. It's not one I managed to talk about in the talk. I don't know what the terminology is in the States, but in Britain we have this notion of a line manager, which is someone you report to. You can actually